All right. How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, just proud to be here.
We're here.
You're here.
Put that phone.
All right. Trust me, there's a few others that wish they would be here tonight.
They would probably be preferring to be here.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
How's everybody doing?
Everybody seems to be doing really good, so.
Good.
Have you heard about Jackie?
Yeah, he actually did not have a heart cath today. They actually were just checking the pressure of his heart, and they were gonna adjust his medication, and most likely through a inhaler medication, they'll be able to restore, where he may not, he'll restore his breathing quite a bit at least.
That's wonderful.
So,
He told us at Life Group he was having a heart cath, so we were all concerned.
Yeah.
But I'm glad.
he wants to have a heart
I
cath.
was gonna say, he sort of could have used one.
Well, yes and no. If you don't need a heart cath, no.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's flowing. Just the pressure of his heart is only supposed to be about 20, and it's at 50. So they need to lower and it's, I guess, the fluid around the heart, and so that keeps it from pumping as well. So it makes him tired more. And so if they fix that, his blood's flowing fine, blood pressure and everything's great. That's why they didn't want to do a heart cath.
Yeah.
He wants one because
Are
the
you,
last time he
you're
had
doing some
one,
great work on your knees, are you?
the reason why he wants one is the last time that he had one, he felt so much better afterwards.
Oh.
And it's very similar. I mean, he's out of energy, that kind of thing, and so he kind of equated the two together, and that's why you don't go to the mechanic for your plumbing.
That's
So
true.
you let the doctor determine what it is you need most. So, all right. Well, we are in Mark chapter 8. Man, this is not right. I mean, I usually ridicule those that come in late and make fun of them. And, you know, it's Brianna's first time here, so I can't do that. Now, Tammy, I could, because Tammy,
They would ignore you anyway.
they usually do. I mean, most people just ignore me anyhow.
I'm like 1 minute late.
Hey, that's all it takes. Late is late, right? No.
Well, you could just tell him that his watch is wrong.
Yeah.
It's not set by me, so it's set by the world clock, not so. Nothing I can do about that. All right, we are in the middle of chapter 8 of Mark, and this is kind of a hinge point. This is a huge change for the book of Mark, and so here in this section, let me get back to there we go. There's some changes that you're gonna see occur in this chapter from this point forward in this chapter. Jesus is going to do a dramatic healing, two-stage healing. It's one of the few two stages of healings. He's got a couple, but this is a rare one. But it's the only one that he does something very specific in the midst of the healing. And then you're going to have Peter make a confession of who Christ is. And then Jesus is going to reveal his true mission and what it takes to be a follower. So we've got all that to kind of cover as best we can tonight. And one thing we might not notice unless we really pay attention to it, from this section forward, Jesus is headed to the cross. And from now till the chapter 10, the end of chapter 10, Jesus is going to be teaching specifically the disciples more than anything. You're not going to see a lot of miracles. You're not going to see as much travel. You're not going to see so many crowds. You're going to see Jesus investing intentionally into the disciples. But it's interesting how he does it and how Mark couches it. Remember I said that Mark likes to do sandwich stories, right? Where you'll start a story and then sandwich something in between it and then come back to it. He kind of does that, but doesn't do that. Here in Mark chapter 8, starting with verse 22, you have this healing of somebody from sight, right? This two-stage healing from blindness to having sight. And in chapter 10, when we get to the end of it, you're going to see where Jesus heals the blind man from Bethsaida. And so you have a healing, a sight healing on both ends. And we don't want to miss the significance of that. Because Jesus is basically using those two, and Mark is kind of depicting those two as here is Jesus telling his disciples, you need to get your sight right. You need to make sure you're seeing what you're seeing, and not what you want to see, but what is really to be seen. And so he's basically saying, look, we need to make sure that you have your spiritual vision cleared and checked and going. And so, starting with here from verse 22 on, we're going to begin dealing with a lot of Jesus's teaching. So, and Jesus is going to use this, especially this first miracle, as a teaching moment as well as a healing moment. So, Mark chapter 8, verse 22. When they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and heal him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then, spitting on the man's eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, "Can you see anything now?" The man looked around. "Yes," he said, "I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, and his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, and he could see everything clearly. Jesus sent him away, saying, "Don't go back into the village on your way home." So here we have Jesus in Bethsaida. Do you remember anything about Bethsaida? There's a couple little things of significance.
The pool.
There's the pool of Bethsaida, so he does a healing there.
Going there.
And that's where we're going to be going at the end of this section. This is actually the hometown of Peter and Andrew and Philip. And if you go back into in John, you find out, this is their familiar turf. This is their homeland. These are homeboys from there. And so they knew the people. And as soon as they arrive, people show up with this blind person. And so obviously, word of Jesus and his miracles have gotten to Bethsaida. And so they're kind of displaying this faith that they have, which is kind of interesting. This blindness, they believe Jesus could heal. But in those days, there's no way to heal blindness. And so the healing of a blind person is kind of a messianic prophecy. If you go back to Isaiah chapter 35, verse 5, it talks about when the Messiah will come, he will heal the blind. And so here you have this person being brought to Jesus to be healed. Wonder why Jesus took him outside the village. Any idea?
No, I wondered that too.
And there's a big part of that. He didn't want it to be a spectacle. He wanted some privacy.
It was a teaching moment for the disciples.
Yeah, it was a teaching moment for the disciples and just for the core.
The core.
And he didn't want it to become a kind of a spectacle. He didn't want all the gawkers, all the onlookers. It's kind of like when there's a car accident. When it's a real serious car accident, they put up blinders around it so you can't see what's going on. But everybody wants to look and see, right? Everybody wants a spectacle. And so Jesus kind of took them away so that they could do that. Now, another interesting thing about Bethsaida. Bethsaida was known for its unbelief. If you go to Luke chapter 10, you'll see where Jesus rebukes them because they don't have faith. And so now the word of Jesus has gotten out, and now they bring this man and by faith for Jesus to heal him. So it's kind of been a little bit of a change there. But there's quite a few in the crowd that's probably more looking for the spectacle of the moment than the Messiah in the moment. The true Messiah, not the political Messiah, which we're going to talk about in a minute. How many of you were grossed out when Jesus spit in the man's eye? Now,
whatever it takes.
Yeah, whatever it takes. I'm sure that's what that guy. But in those days, there was a belief that saliva had medicinal purposes. And so when Jesus spit in his eyes, this man's thinking, "Oh, I'm getting ready to be healed." Okay, there's the saliva, there's the balm, there's the cure that's going to happen. Remember, just back in Mark chapter 7, Jesus did the same thing with a man's ears, right? Took spit and put it in his man's ears. I don't get that. Touched his tongue, all that kind of, no, I'm good. But it signaled to the man that there was a personal touch, that healing was coming. And so it was kind of a huge time. Now, this is the only recorded time in Scripture where Jesus stops mid-healing and asks the man a question. You've been to the eye doctor, right? And they do the eye test on you. Do you like A or B? 1 or 2? They're doing the corrections, the adjustments. That's kind of what Jesus does here. And actually, with an eye doctor kind of mentality. He does this first miracle, this first part of it, and asks the man, "Do you see anything?" It's kind of interesting that he would ask the man to be participating in the miracle. Because the man could say, "Oh, I can see now." Because he could see some, but not clearly. He could see a little bit. And so Jesus is kind of drawing him in, but it's also a lesson for the disciples
Yes.
that they are being drawn in to participate in what Jesus has for them. It's not just Jesus being the spectacle for them either. So the man looks up and says, I see people, but they look like trees walking around. Okay?
That means he could see at some
Before,
point.
exactly. That's the assumption here. That is the clear assumption that at some time in this guy's life he could actually see, but now, because he recognized what a tree would look like, right? I kind of in my mind envision little oak trees walking around kind of thing, or whatever. It's just trees is all just blurry, and you can't see anything but just the outline of the image. So he could see, but his healing was only partial. I wonder why it wasn't completely complete the first time. You know, Jesus has the ability to instantaneously heal.
I think he was sending a message to his disciples.
Yeah.
From the previous
Yeah.
section.
Exactly. This is really more about what he's wanting to teach his disciples than really about this man being healed. Because Jesus could have just healed him instantly and been done without, because we've seen it, right? But now he gets touched the second time, and this time he's fully healed. I like how Mark does this. He emphasizes it 3 times to emphasize that this man was healed. It says his eyes were open, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. 3 things. Remember, Mark likes to do the repetition of 3s. So this is another signal of Mark going, this is huge here. The word clearly, it means that it was something that you could see at a distance, and it was completely clear, like 20/20 vision or better. So it's not just, I can make myself around okay. You know, if I take off my glasses, you guys are pretty blurry, but I can still walk around the room and be okay. I could probably operate. You don't want me driving. But for him, this clearly means eyes are perfect, beyond perfect. So he's completely healed. It happens in 2 stages. And then Jesus gives him a stern instruction. Don't go into the village on your way home. Why? Why do you think?
He didn't want to tell them about it
Why?
because he didn't want the fame.
And the crowd's coming after him.
Okay.
For healing.
Yeah. And it would arouse the crowd again. But even more importantly, here, going back to the messianic prophecy being revealed, this man could go back and go, my eyes have been healed, my eyes have been opened. And everybody go, this is the Messiah.
Messiah.
But what were they looking for in a Messiah?
Political.
King.
A king. Somebody to take over the Roman government for them, to take them out of oppression. And Jesus did not want that kind of word getting out.
He didn't want that hanging on him.
Not yet. Not yet. And so Mark kind of positions the story for to kind of talk about the disciples' spiritual condition as well. In chapter 8, verse 18, remember Jesus asked the disciples, you have eyes, but don't you see? And here now, he clearly helps a man see who had no eyes and now are clear. And he's asking them kind of with a metaphor going, look, you need to be able to see better than what you do. One of the commentators that I was reading said this 2-stage healing enacted kind of a metaphor for the disciples. The disciples had received a first touch from Jesus where they dimly saw him as special. You know, they saw him doing all the performing and all the miracles and all the teaching and all that. He's great. And some even as Messiah, because Peter's getting ready to voice that. Spoiler alert. But there's also the understanding that their understanding is blurry still. They see him maybe as Messiah, but their definition of Messiah is what's blurring right now. It's kind of like they see the image, but it's a blurry tree to them. They see there is a Messiah there, but it's not the Messiah that is well defined as Jesus defines him. And so this miracle, this healing, is kind of a metaphor that they need a second touch, so to say. And that comes with what's going to happen from here to the end of chapter 10. From 11 to the end of Mark is Jesus' last week of life, just so you know. So
hard.
Mark's kind of an interesting book because you have this really long period covering 2.5 years, 3 years worth of Jesus' life and ministry. And then you've got the last 5 chapters is just the last week. And so you've got a big chunk, 1/3 of the book is just the last week. And so from here to the end of chapter 10 is Jesus giving them that second touch, teaching them, giving them, hopefully helping their understanding. And it comes through his teaching and then later the crucifixion and then his resurrection before they finally figure out this is what the Messiah is.
My study Bible says that in Mark right here, that this is the only time that he's really teaching the disciples and his disciples get to understand him
Yes.
there.
Yeah. He gets to speak directly to them in ways that they understand.
But they've been taught their whole life what
The Old Testament, all the prophecies, they should know that. Now,
but they've been taught wrongly because they all had a messed up idea of what the Messiah was going
Right.
to be. They read the scriptures, they knew the scriptures.
Yeah. not clearly.
But,
Clearly not clearly.
No, true,
Yeah.
but I think that was why it was so difficult to wrap your head around this
They had to
person.
they had to unlearn that before they
Yes.
could relearn this.
Yeah, that's really it. And you have to understand their context, their situation. They're in a major oppression to the Roman government.
Absolutely.
And so their idea of a Messiah coming to save Israel, which is what the Old Testament said, the Messiah is going to come and save Israel. For them to be saved, they think it's from the Roman government, where really it's an eternal salvation that the Messiah comes for. Yes, and it's for everyone. And so that's a whole different understanding of what they need, what they have. So that's where Jesus is heading now. This healing and the subsequent events encourage believers, hopefully us, that spiritual enlightenment is often a process. That there are times when you receive grace and you receive every bit of it in one instant moment, but then you grow from that point. And sometimes you have multiple points where you have a crisis and you receive grace and you continue to grow in the process.
Sanctification is almost like
Sanctification is a growth process throughout your life, from the beginning to the end. It's a growth. None of us reach the perfection until we get to heaven. We always are flawed. We always have propensity and possibility of sin in our life. And so, we often think of sanctification as both instantaneous and progressive at the same time, because there has that instantaneous moment, but then there's a progression of growth and grace afterwards. So then we move to Peter's confession of the Messiah. So here you have them in Bethsaida, and Jesus dismisses the man that he just healed. And so then Jesus and his disciples, in verse 27, left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others say you're one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Peter replied, "You are the Messiah." But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Now, there's a couple things I want to. What do you know about Caesarea Philippi? Anything?
Where that satanic
There's
temple is.
there's a lot of temples there. It's a major, at that time it was a major hub of multiple religions going on at the same time.
City.
It was a very pagan city. There were temples to the god Pan, which is multiple things. There is a cave there where they call it the gates of hell, the gates of Hades. There's a huge well there, and in those days they thought that that's where the spirit world and the physical world collided, and spirits would come in and out of that area. There's a huge cliff with little concaves back in it, where they would put little idols that they would worship in. There was a huge temple, a huge palace temple to Caesar. So people could go there to worship Caesar, the Roman god, the Roman emperor. And this town being Caesarea Philippi, was named after Caesar and Philip, the son of Herod. And so you have a whole lot of secular, worldly worship going on. There were temples to sex goddess, fertility gods, those kind of things where people would just flock to, and anything and everything crazily happened. I mean, it was the worst of the worst of places to be religiously. It was Jews would call it a dark place. They tended to never go there simply because of all the religious culture, anti-God religious culture that is there.
And the multiplicities of gods.
Yeah.
It's at the source of the Jordan River.
And it's at the base of Mount Hermon, which is the base of the Jordan River, ironically, right? And so you've got a lot of things at play here. And so Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do the people say that I am?" Interesting replies. Some common theories that were circulating is he was John the Baptist come back from the dead. Others would say Elijah, because Elijah did a lot of miracles, and here Jesus is doing all these miracles, and so they thought, okay, this has to be Elijah coming back. And others just said he's just like another prophet, any other Old Testament prophet come back to life.
They were just telling him what they had heard.
Yeah, they're just telling him what the people have said. Many Jews expected for Elijah to come back before the return of the Messiah. If you go back to Malachi chapter 4, verse 5, it has the prophecy of Elijah coming back. And so Jesus' miracles and his authority reminded them of Elijah, so they thought maybe he's Elijah. Many of the people thought that he was the Messiah, but they wouldn't outwardly say it. I think there's a lot of people, because of the authority that he showed. When you look back at the miracles that we've read about already just in Mark, and not all of Jesus' miracles are in Mark, but just in the miracles that we've seen, there's a lot of authority. When you're calming storms and you're healing sick and you're raising dead, you kind of have some authority, right? You're not just your common everyday person. And so they were looking at Jesus and thinking, maybe he is, but I'm afraid to say it. He's a forerunner to the Messiah. That's a safer bet. And that's a safer thing to say. For a couple reasons. If they were to declare that Jesus was the Messiah,
They'd be thrown out of the synagogue.
yeah, they'd be thrown out of the synagogue if they're Jew, and they're in a Roman city. That means that now you're giving your allegiance to Jesus and not to Caesar, so you can be taken out and killed, thrown in jail at the best, killed at most. And so there's a lot at risk for them to say anything. And so then Jesus looks at the disciples, the 12 in front of him. And then here's one of the few times where we have him talking just directly to his 12.
Yes.
He's kind of pulled them aside. There are other people there. We're going to see this in just a moment. There's others there, but he's talking directly to his disciples. Who do you say that I am? So he's been with them now for quite a while. They've seen every miracle, not just some of the miracles. Most of the other people have only seen some of the miracles. They've seen firsthand accounts. They've heard firsthand Jesus' teaching. And now he's looking at them and saying, who do you think I am? Who do you say that I am? I think that's a question that Jesus asks everyone who follows him.
I think so too.
And I think all of us answer that, but not always all the same way. Peter answers for the 12. It's kind of interesting. I don't think the others would have disagreed with Peter. I think he was just the spokesman for the crowd.
The old impetus.
Peter's the one who always speaks first and thinks second, or he's the one that's always the first to do something. So he's the reactionary man. And so Peter answers on behalf of the 12 with a bold confession. You are the Christ. Matthew's account adds, you are the Son of the living God. But Mark records just a real short declaration. And by the way, Christ is not Jesus' last name. Don't let anybody kid you on that. It's just a part of a title for him. In the Greek equivalent to Christ is Messiah. And it also means the anointed one. If you go back to the Old Testament, the kings were anointed by God to be the king. And so when they declare Jesus is the anointed one, it's a declaration that he is anointed by God, that he is the chosen one, that he is the Messiah. And so he's the one that is chosen, and he is the promised Savior King. And this is huge. Up to this point, in the book of Mark, no human has declared Jesus as Christ. There's been a couple situations where he has been declared divine. Remember, you have he was either called the Holy One or the Son of God by the demons when he cast them out, right? But no human had declared him at this point Christ or the Messiah to this point. Something very interesting in the book of Mark. The phrase, "You are the Messiah," is the exact middle of Mark's book. We've just hit the midpoint. And it's also the central theme that Mark wants to get across in his entire book, that Jesus is the Messiah. I love how that all kind of works together. You know, that this would be the absolute, if you counted the words before and you counted the words after, this is the exact middle.
Wow.
It's exactly what Mark wants us to get.
It's the bullseye.
It is the bullseye. That's exactly it. If you get that, you got it. You win. And so this is a huge turning point in the narrative. So why do you think Jesus told them, don't tell anyone about him? I mean, I just preached a message Sunday that said, go and tell everybody about him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here Jesus is telling his disciples, don't tell anybody about him. Why?
He wasn't ready for everybody to know that.
Okay.
He still had more teaching to do also to the disciples before.
Okay.
You just said there was a whole lot of confusion going on.
Yeah.
Others wouldn't believe him.
Yeah. You get all of that is correct. One, he doesn't want the fanfare again. If he goes and tells people he's the Messiah, some people are going to come because they have an idea of the Messiah, of what they want from the Messiah, and so they will rush to him for that. His disciples didn't fully understand, even though they said, you are the Messiah. It was in their mindset of what a Messiah was that they were answering. And for them to declare him the Messiah, it was more of the political leader, the military leader, the freedom giver of oppression on earth. And the crazy thing is, they're exactly right, except for that on earth part. Right? Right? He is the liberator. He is the savior. He is the leader, the one who's going to lead us out of oppression and probably take care of things politically and spiritually and everything. But not on earth. Right? And we're the same way, right? I mean, how many times have you ever said, man, I just can't wait, Jesus needs to come back? It's the only way this is going to ever get fixed is if Jesus comes back, right? But we want him to come back to fix
What's wrong?
the physical here. That's not what he's coming back for, right? In fact, if you read the end of the book, he does the exact opposite. He removes the Christians out of the equation and lets them literally go to hell all on their own, right? I mean, they go to pieces. And so that's kind of the thing. And so Jesus knows that these guys need a little more education, a little more understanding on who the Messiah is or what the Messiah truly is before he goes and tells them to go spread the news. Messiah was loaded with popular expectations. The warrior king to overthrow the Roman government and reestablish Israel's glory. That's what they would have been declaring.
And I think that Jesus really knew that whenever he left, that he was going to leave those 12 or 11 of 12 to carry on for him. And so they needed to have a first-hand understanding of who he was and what he was.
Yeah. And that's really where we're headed in Mark from this point forward, is that Jesus begins teaching them, telling them what that is. And I think one of the first things that Jesus gets ready to teach them, we're going to read this, another spoiler alert, is that the Messiah must suffer and die. Now think how contradictory that is to what they're thinking is. Because in their mind, the Messiah is coming to kill and destroy,
Mhm.
not suffer and die. It's the exact opposite, right? And so in their mind, they're on the polar opposite end of where Jesus needs them to be.
I think
And
Jesus just jerks the feet out from under them.
pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty much. And so there's a lot of context that's really important as Jesus declares this. Where he did it, he could have done this anywhere, right? He could have gone to Jerusalem and done it right at the temple,
Mhm.
right? But instead he did it at what is known in the Jewish world as the worst spiritual place to ever be.
Where is that located now?
It's just north of Jerusalem. It's again Mount Hermon. If you locate Mount Hermon on the map, that's Caesarea
That's where
Philippi.
it is.
Yep,
Okay.
just on the south end of it.
It's
Yep.
about 25 miles north of Bethesda.
Okay.
I've got this whole scene in my mind from The Chosen
Oh yeah,
show.
yeah. That's a good scene.
Yeah.
And so in where Jesus did it, it kind of underscores Jesus telling them, look, this is my identity, and it surpasses all of these world powers, all of these false deities. Who I am is greater than all of these. In another account, this is the same place where Jesus declares, on this rock, I will build my church. In other words, my church will surpass these churches. My divinity, my
And they still
kingdom
don't
will surpass
understand.
these kingdoms, and they're still clueless.
So
Yeah.
hard to understand.
Peter is the rock.
Yes, he becomes his name means yes, but where they're standing is what Jesus was really pointing to. But then he uses Peter to start the church, so you've got both connotations going at the same time. Even though Peter gets the right title, I think Jesus knows that they all lack understanding, and so they need the details. And so that's what's getting ready to happen next.
In one of the other gospels, it says that the Holy Spirit must have revealed this to you.
Yeah, and I think that's not an instantaneous. I think that's an over time watching all that they had seen. He had learned to know that this is truly who this is. But at the same time, it's hadn't been revealed as the Messiah that Jesus defined as Messiah compared to who they defined the Messiah to be. All right, and so now let's go to verse 31. Verse 31 through 33. We're going to break this into a couple sections here. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. As he talked about this openly with the disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's."
What a harsh rebuke for Peter.
Yeah,
I mean, really.
very much so. But immediately after Peter declares Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus begins unfolding what the mission of the Messiah is. And again, look how quick he's trying to change their mind. Remember, their mind of the Messiah is this warrior king, and Jesus says, this Messiah, the Son of Man, which is the title that Jesus always gave himself, said, it must be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes. First thing must happen. Who's rejecting him?
Sanhedrin.
The Sanhedrin, who are
Teachers of the law.
religious leaders.
Yeah.
They're the church.
Yeah.
The first thing that has to happen to the Messiah is that the Jewish worship system has to reject him. Who sent him to the cross?
And they did.
They did.
They did. That's exactly right. So right now, Jesus is saying that even the worship of God that we have, that we know, has to be overthrown, because they'll reject me. It's not what they're looking for. It's not what they're wanting. It's not what they were predicting. And so they have to reject him. And then what's going to happen to Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of Man? he must be killed. This is your warrior king. This is the one who's going to, in their minds, save them from Rome. This is the one who's going to help make Israel back to be the nation that it used to be. He's going to be killed. If Jesus would have stopped right there, I think all those guys would have left him. They would have been done. They were dispersed. Because all of a sudden now, he's not at all what they were looking for. Because they were looking for a salvation physically on earth. But Jesus didn't stop there.
No, he
He
wouldn't.
told him he was gonna rise again.
In 3 days, he's going to rise. What's so significant about that?
What gives them hope?
Hmm.
That he's coming back still that he will rise and overtake the Roman government.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand anything else.
Yeah.
Well, this all had to be in the background, it's historically in their minds, short history, but it had to be in their minds, the way I see it, so that when it happened, they could reflect back and say, oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. This is a great foreshadowing of what they're getting ready. I don't think they fully understood this.
Oh, I don't either.
I mean, they saw Jesus heal people. They saw Jesus feed 4,000 and 5,000. They saw Jesus walk on water. They saw Jesus do a whole lot. And even one girl who was dead, now alive, right? That's awesome. But can you bring yourself back from the dead?
They didn't understand that.
I mean, that had to be incredibly mind-boggling for them.
That had to be a God thing.
Yeah, I mean, the only way it could be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's break this down just a little bit. First, the Son of Man. That comes from Daniel, chapter 7, verse 13, 14, where Daniel says, one like the Son of Man is coming, is given all the authority and glory by God. And so when he calls himself that, all those who were Jewish heard this and went, oh, I know right where that is. I know right who that is. That's the Messiah. I mean, all the disciples would have known right then, this is him. This is the one Daniel prophesied about. It's not, it wasn't commonly used title by the Jews, by the way, at least in Jesus' day. So it carried a lot less biblical or political power or political baggage as the word Messiah would have. If he would have called himself the Messiah, their minds would have stayed where it was. But calling himself the Son of Man, now he can say, no. This is the new definition. This is really what the Messiah is. And so it also then it signifies and it emphasizes both Jesus' humanity. He's the Son of Man, so he's human, and a divine exaltation because it's Daniel's calling of the Son of Man is a heavenly figure. And so Jesus is using this title. It reveals that he sees himself as the fulfillment of that prophecy, but he couples it with suffering, which was not expected in Daniel's vision. Okay? And by saying must suffer, that takes away any wiggle room. This is a necessity. It's necessary. The Greek word is theirs means that it is absolutely necessary.
That's his line in the sand.
Yeah. And so what he's saying is that this is God's plan for redemption, and it's not an accident. So when he does die, it's part of the plan. It's not somebody foiled the plan. Jesus was the plan, and then the Roman government killed the plan, literally. No. Jesus is saying this has to happen, and when this does happen, that's a signal to you that this is God's plan. It's okay. Because here's the rest of the plan. He must suffer, be killed, and in 3 days rise again. What Jesus just gave them was the gospel in a nutshell, right? I mean, if somebody were to ask you,
That's the good news.
what is Christianity? What does this mean? What is the gospel? Well, the gospel is that Jesus died and rose again, that he came and he suffered under the hands of Pontius Pilate, and he was crucified, and he died, he was buried, but yet he rose again on the third day. And so it's Jesus, the Messiah, must suffer and die for the sins as a sacrifice for sin. Although Jesus doesn't expound on that there. That's the connotation behind it all. And then he'll rise again. The disciples probably didn't even register the idea of rise again. the notion of suffering and dying was dominant and wasn't that dominant and wasn't that normal to them. It wasn't something that they always thought of the resurrection, the return again, would happen at the end. And so this is now, okay, this is not the plan they had always heard of. So now you have somebody being interjected in the middle. And so he's predicting his resurrection and even given a timeline for it, 3 days later. You know, it's interesting that, you know, at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, the disciples went back to the upper room. I wonder if this was in the back of their mind going, okay, he said he'd be back in 3 days. Let's go wait. Let's go see this happen. Because he put the timeline in them. And I don't even know if they will completely grasp that until after it happens. When Jesus said it, I don't think it really registered with them completely.
Because whenever they went into the upper room, again, they locked the doors.
Yeah, because they were afraid they're going to get taken out next.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that Mark really notes that Jesus spoke plainly about this.
Yeah.
He didn't leave much wiggle room or much argument room. He spoke very plain so that they could understand it clearly. And there was no, did he say this or did he say that? I mean, this is very succinct, very clear. The Son of Man will be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the leaders. He must suffer, he will be killed, and he will be raised on the third day.
No parables.
Yeah, there was no, okay, what do you mean here, Jesus? Explain the parable to me kind of thing. It was very clear exactly what he was saying. This clarity, though, collides head on with what the disciples expected. And so they're trying to wrestle this in their mind a little bit. Peter had just confessed that Jesus was the Messiah, and now he's alarmed. You would think that if Peter said, okay, you're the Messiah, and then Jesus says, okay, this is what the Messiah does, that he'd be like, yes. But he's like, no. He's the exact opposite. Instead, he pulls Jesus aside and reprimands him.
Because he thought he was talking about the Messiah in his
brain.
What the Messiah was.
Exactly. And so he's like, no. Our Messiah doesn't get killed. Our Messiah doesn't suffer. Our Messiah triumphs, wins. Our Messiah can't be defeated. And it's total opposite. He takes Jesus aside and rebukes him. The Greek word for rebuke is very strong. It's the same word that Jesus used when he rebuked the demons earlier in Mark. And so it's a strong rebuke. This is huge. It's the same word that Jesus used when he rebuked the storms. And so it has a lot of authority behind it, a lot of power behind it. In Matthew's accounts, Peter adds on, no, Lord, this never will happen. Okay, so he adds a little bit to it. There's a little more emphasis to it. So Peter probably thinks he's being loyal. He's trying to connect and stop Jesus' negative talk. And perhaps Jesus is trying to assure Jesus that he would never let this happen. Remember, Peter was the one who always carried a little knife with him, right? He's the guy that cut off the ear, right? And so he's a fighter. Mm-hmm. And so he's declaring to Jesus, I won't let that happen. There's no way. And so in Peter's mind, he's thinking, how could the Christ, the Son of God, possibly ever be rejected and executed? That would never happen. I'll never let that. That sounded very defeatist and very much blasphemous to him. And so you also have to consider that if the master's killed, what happens to the followers, right? Well, remember, locked in the room again, right? And so he's thinking, I can't let him die, because if he dies, they're coming after us, right? So that can't be. And so maybe Peter's own hopes and his own plans are kind of unraveling as Jesus makes this prophecy, this prediction. And then Jesus replies, and I love this because Mark says that now Jesus reprimands him. So we got reprimand being reprimanded, right? And he says, get behind me, Satan, right? Now, he's not really saying that Peter is Satan. What he's saying is that the same spirit that tempted him in the desert has now got into Peter to tempt Jesus, to declare, I can be taken. I won't ever be defeated. It's also interesting if you look at the temptations of Jesus in the desert. He was tempted by three things. What were those three things?
Turning bread, stone into bread, jumping off of the temple.
Mm-hmm. And what was the third one?
He would be the most powerful.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
took him up and let him see
He'd
the
be more
word.
powerful than God.
exactly. And that's kind of where Peter is saying, look, it's kind of all these things wrapped into one. I can't let this happen. And he goes, no, get behind me. These things have to happen. It's kind of interesting that the same temptations that happened in the garden, in the desert, are happening here. All kind of together, all kind of wrapped up, all kind of put back into Jesus going, you could be the Messiah that has all authority. You could be the Messiah that can make things, that create things. You could be the Messiah that the whole religious world will follow and never die. You can have that. But that's not God's plan. So that's why Jesus says, get behind me. He's not implying that Peter is literally Satan, but in that moment that Peter's kind of being the mouthpiece of Satan, or the tempter like Satan. One of Satan's temptations was to take the easy path to glory, avoiding suffering, bowing down. You can have the kingdom. And so here Peter knowingly or unknowingly offers the same kind of temptation. Surely the Messiah will not have to suffer and die. There's another way to be king. And get behind me is also significant. Jesus is basically looking at him and going, get back in line. I'm the leader here. You're the follower. Stay in your lane. Let me lead you. You can't go past me. There's a plan in this.
I'm number one, you're number two.
And I think he says that to us too. Because we want what we want when we want it, how we want it from Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want Jesus to be who we want him to be when we want him to be it, right?
Too often.
And Jesus is saying, get behind me. Let me lead. You lead from the front, right? And so if we're in front and Jesus says get behind, then we must be leading and not letting him lead. And he's saying, look, let me lead. That's what I'm here to do. And then Jesus pinpoints the problem in verse 33. Says you're setting your mind on things of you're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man or the world, right? And so Peter's thinking again in human terms, and Jesus is trying to get him to rewire his brain of what the definition of Messiah is. That in Peter's term, Messiah means power and glory and victory now. And the things of man prioritize the self-preservation, comfort, earthly success, the things we want, right? And the things of God in this case kind of involve sacrifice, suffering, love, and greater victory, but through resurrection. And there's the thing that we're going to start, that Jesus kind of hones in on here in a minute, the idea of you will have greater victory. You will have incredible victory, but it comes after a death and a resurrection. It can't come just without that. And it's not just him that I'm talking about. I'm talking about us too. We can't have the greater victory here now on our own unless we die to ourselves and allow him to resurrect us and change us. And so there's a great prophecy implications there. God's plan for the Messiah was to defeat sin and death by suffering and by dying as a ransom. Mark 10:45 will spell this out later as we get to that. And this was foretold. If you go back to Isaiah 53, the entire chapter talks all about the suffering Messiah, right? And so it's kind of interesting. Every Jew read that. They all knew that.
But they didn't understand it.
Or they chose not to, because that's the Messiah they didn't want, right? We read what we want to read. We accept what we want to accept. And so they only accepted what it is they wanted for their Messiah. And so and Jesus made it very clear that the opposite, or to oppose the suffering mission of the Messiah is to oppose God's will. Because that was God's plan from the beginning. Jesus's death and resurrection was the plan before the world was even created, but it was never accepted.
Isaiah just articulated it.
Yeah. And I think maybe the implication and the importance of this for us is that we need to realize what we need to submit to God's will over our own desires. Because we want to define certain things and have certain things our way. And if Scripture talks against it or describes them a different way or defines them a different way, we don't always accept it. Even though it's in black and white, some in red, depending on what kind of Bible you have. But we don't like to accept it because it means we've got to change. Or we don't win. If in the case of like the Jews, they're realizing, wait a minute, this guy's our Messiah, but yet he's not going to overthrow the Romans for us. That's what we want him to do. So we can be who we want to be. That's not God's plan.
There had to be a sacrifice,
Yeah, there had to be a sacrifice.
a perfect one.
Yeah, and that's
Not
none of
one
us.
goat and-
None of us.
No.
And so Jesus' rebuke to get behind me, it also kind of implies or implicitly reissues the call for Peter to follow me. Remember on the beach? Jesus said, follow me. And so now Jesus is implying again, follow me. Don't try to lead me, follow me. And our spiritual journey, we have to continue. We have to continue to let Jesus stay ahead of us and let him lead. Especially when his path and his plan contradicts our expectations. Because we know we've got it figured out, right?
We think we do.
We think we do.
Listen,
We sure don't. I screw it up more than I get it right. I'm just telling you. And so Jesus has now corrected the disciples' understanding of what he must do as the Messiah heading to the cross. And so now he turns to what they, as the disciples, must do. Because what's their mindset of what the follower of their mindset of the Messiah? What were their benefits of following that Messiah?
Oh, they was gonna be on the right and on the left hand.
Exactly. I mean, we hear, and the funny thing is, we still hear this later, right? They still, I mean, even after Jesus spends this concentrated time with them, it's still in their brain. You know, we want to sit on your left and right. We want our place in the kingdom, and so they have their own mindset of what they're in this for. And so now Jesus, after telling them, okay, let me rewire what your definition of Messiah means. Now let me rewire what your definition of you means, the follower. So we pick up now in verse 34.
Disciples.
Then calling the crowd to join his disciples. That's kind of a key phrase right there. What does that tell you? There were other people there. Jesus just did this last thing with just his disciples, and now he turns and he invites who knows how many other people that were there.
He's in a crowd.
He's in a crowd. He said, if any of you, I can see him just kind of looking around pointing, if any of you want to be my follower, you must, the word must again, give up your own way. Take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is there anything more than your own soul, or worth more than your own soul? If anyone's ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns to the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So now Jesus, after defining who the Messiah is, one who's going to be rejected, who's going to be suffering, who's going to be killed, but will be resurrected, now turns to the disciples and says, this is who you need to be. So he turns to the crowd and calls the crowd and his disciples together, and it indicates that this is for anyone who wants to follow him, not just those 12, which means that as we've just read this, it includes us. If we are going to be a true follower of Jesus, this is what it means for us. These are what we must do. And I love that Mark puts the word must there. You know, it's the, you know, we've all had, you know, job descriptions given to us, right? And they spell out exactly what it is you must do, what this job entails. And so that's exactly what Jesus does here. But he only has 3 things on the job description for us. And I like that. It parallels, Jesus had 3 things. He was going to be rejected, going to suffer and die, right? Suffer and die, and then be resurrected. And now he tells his disciples, okay, I have 3 things, you have 3 things that you have to do too. The first one is you must deny yourself. To deny oneself is really not to lessen yourself in any way, but it's really saying I'm not going to keep myself in charge or controlling the authority of my life. I'm going to give this control, the authority of my life, to God. I'm going to submit to Him. It means saying no to my own personal agenda and saying yes to God's agenda for me.
Absolutely.
Whatever that looks like. And that's, anybody here ever write somebody a blank check? If you ever write somebody a blank check, that's a lot of faith and trust, right? Right? Because they could put whatever they want in that check, right? They could write whatever they want in that amount. And it may be way more than what you got in the bank. But you got to deal with it, right? Jesus is asking us to give a blank check. But also in trust and love, knowing that He's only going to put the very best in there for us. You know, He wants us to, you know, deny ourselves, submit to Him. Jesus does not ask the disciples to deny something to themselves, but deny the self of things, of all the self-promoting, of their own personal ambitions, of their own self-serving desires. And what He's really saying is discipleship, it's not volunteer, it's not part-time work.
And it's putting God as number 1.
Yes.
First.
His
And
will.
nothing else.
And you're second.
And the reality is God refuses to take a minor role in our life. He wants us to be allowing Him to be the controller on the throne, as we say, of our life. Those who deny themselves have learned to say, not my will be done, but your will be done. Right? Which means, if I have to suffer, I have to suffer. I'm okay with that. Because I know what the ultimate is. You know, that's saying that, you know, when Paul was saying, you know, I've run the race, I've won the prize. The prize was heaven, not earth. And so it's having that different mindset that, okay, if this is what God's will is for my life, even that means that I have to suffer and die, I'm okay because I win in the end.
Yeah.
Because I know where I'm
Right there,
going.
End of the story.
Exactly. We know we're headed to heaven, so it's okay. The concept of entire consecration comes to play here. It's not just giving God a little bit here and there. They say in salvation, God gives us all of Him, and we give God part of us. In sanctification, we give God all of us. That's when we fully submit to Him. That's when we say, God, whatever you want, I'll do.
Amen.
Yeah, I'm in. 100%, 110%. Whatever you ask, I'm in. And again, it goes back to, that's writing a blank check and giving it to God and going, I'll let you cash it any way you want. Knowing that He's only going to give us the best. He wants better for us than what we want for us. And sometimes we can't realize that when we have our own blinders on, what we want. So the moment of complete surrender, consecration, is when we say that unconditional yes to God. And denying ourselves is essentially the posture that says, I'm stepping off the throne of my life and I'm letting God take control and be on the throne of my life. It's a decisive turning away from my own egocentric life and turning to a God-centered, Christ-centered life. So that's the taking up my cross and denying myself. Now, take up your cross. Now, think for a moment that you're a first century Jew. Okay? And Jesus says, take up your cross. What do you think of?
Death,
Yeah. The only place they've ever seen it.
pain, suffering.
The most cruel death, most painful death for the worst of all criminals. And the take up your cross is kind of huge, because the criminal that was getting crucified had to carry the crossbar
Himself.
themselves to the cross. Okay? And so when he said take up your cross, that means you're headed to death, and you're willing to head to death if that's what it takes. In their mind, it wasn't a religious symbol. It was a horrific reality that was inflicted upon the very worst of the worst, and it meant nothing but pain and death. And it signified a one-way journey, saying you're as good as dead. No two ways about it. So what's Jesus demanding in this? Essentially, he's saying this is the time of absolute surrender, a willing to suffer, even to die, for your allegiance to him. He's saying that following him requires death of your old life, a kind of a crucifixion of your own self-centered desires. But it also implies a willingness to bear reproach. The cross was shameful. Cicero said that civilized people shouldn't even speak of it in polite company. So they didn't want to talk about the cross. It's kind of like, you don't go to your family reunion and start talking about the electric chair, right?
Right.
It's kind of the same kind of concept. And so Jesus followers must be willing to be scorned, made fun of, lose your reputation by the world. In practical terms, take up a cross means accepting whatever sacrifices, persecution, or hardship that may come because of your loyalty to Jesus. It means as a disciple that you have signed away your life to Christ, as of saying, I've already died to this world and my life belongs to Jesus. For us, it may not mean a literal martyrdom. I mean, for us, I don't know of any Christian in the United States that's died because they're a Christian that I've ever known personally. You go overseas, happens on a regular basis.
That's what I was thinking. I think it's harder for Americans
Mhm.
to have the concept of giving up. Jewish people have been through,
They understand it.
they knew all about that.
Yeah.
For generations and generations.
Yes.
But we, the privileged we.
Yeah.
It's.
We're fortunate and unfortunate at the same
Yeah,
time.
because, if you go on mission trips, you see how most of the world really lives.
Yes.
And they know the concept of doing without
Yes.
and going hungry and.
Yeah. And being persecuted for their faith,
Right.
Yes.
even more so. And we don't understand that. Well, we don't understand that at all. And so the idea of, we may not have the literal martyrdom, but it means living with the attitude of my life is no longer my own, as Paul said in Galatians, because I've been crucified with Christ. In the Wesleyan circle of theology, we talk about dying to ourselves. It's an experience of entire sanctification where the self-will is crucified, so to say, and one is filled with holy love. And so that's the idea of giving yourself completely to God. And then the third thing that Jesus said, follow me. Now that might sound obvious, right? They're disciples. What do? They follow their leader, right? But this is a foreshadowing for Jesus.
And they're all gonna die because of their faith except John.
Yeah, and he does too. He gets exiled to an island and dies on an island. The rest of them die a martyr's life, without a doubt. Jesus emphasizes this because it's possible to admire Jesus or to stay at a distance without truly following him. That's what all the other people around were doing, right? That's why he didn't want the guy going back into the village. That's why he'd been telling people, don't tell anybody about me, right? Because they just wanted the fanfare. And Jesus is saying, if you're going to be a true follower of mine, you have to be willing to walk in my footsteps. And to follow means to go where he goes. And Jesus is headed one place right now, to the cross. And so it's kind of a foreshadowing for him to say, this is where I'm headed. And if you're going to be one of my disciples, you have to so much die to yourself that you're willing to do this, if that's what it takes, to be persecuted for your faith. And then Jesus gives up the rationale in a series of paradoxical statements. If you want to save your life, you'll lose it. But if you are willing to lose your life for my sake, you'll save it. Right? It's opposites. And what he's thinking is, there's a difference between the temporal, physical world here and the eternal, spiritual world that you will save your life in. He's saying, we're trying to, there's this divine paradox of trying to save or cling to your own life in terms of that leads you to lose it. But if you lose it for Jesus and for the sake of the gospel, you'll actually save it. You'll preserve it. You will have it again in even fuller sense.
There is a life after this world.
Yes. And then he says, what does it profit a person to gain the whole world and forfeit their soul? And what can you give in return for your soul? The soul is of infinite value, right? It has eternal value. Whereas I don't think I've ever seen a U-Haul following the hearse in the funeral procession. We can have all the world's wealth and it mean nothing to us. And we can have nothing in this world and have everything in the end. That's really what Jesus is saying. No accumulation of money or achievement can purchase your soul.
I get to thinking about the story about Lazarus.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Send an angel to tell my brothers what they're doing isn't right. What they're living for isn't worth living for. And Jesus says, they've got the prophets, they've had all the Old Testament and seen miracles. None of that will probably sway them if that hasn't already. So then Jesus kind of gives them this warning and a promise in verse 38. If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. What Jesus is also doing now, he's foreshadowing his return, and that he is the one who will be on the judgment seat, that we'll all be judged, and that if we aren't willing to stand up and be his followers here, he has no recourse but not be our defender there. And so there's this call for us to be a bold witness and to be faithful. And let's just be honest, our culture sometimes calls Christians intolerant or outdated or irrelevant. And so there's a lot of people that don't live out their faith because of embarrassment, or they want to be ridiculed, or how's it going to affect my job, my family, my relationships, whatever. And Jesus is saying you've got to be willing to put those things beside if you're going to follow me. Maybe that's your cross. Maybe that's what you have to die on. And so it's are we willing to live out our faith over embarrassment? So in summary, chapter 8 teaches us that Jesus is indeed the Messiah, but a Messiah who serves and suffers. And that to follow him, we must walk the path of service and sacrifice and faith. And so now we're going to head to the cross from this point forward, his teaching of the disciples. So, sorry we went a little bit late. It's not my fault. Carol came in last and late, and it's her fault. If she had came in on time, we would have. I had to wait on you, Carol. No, I'm kidding.
you were off the hook.
You're off the hook.
Yeah, right now.
You can thank Carol later, right?
Yeah.
Any
Yeah,
questions
he was
on
giving
chapter
us
8?
a hard time before you came in.
Any thoughts or anything on chapter 8?
Like the points you made about get behind me. You get ahead of him, you just gonna get in trouble.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Disaster.
Been there and done
It's very disastrous, isn't it?
Yes.
It is. We're sometimes our worst enemy. We're our own worst enemy, that's for sure. Well, before we go, let me pray for us. How's that? Father, we thank you today for your word that you've given to us through Mark. We thank you for your call to us to see you better. Not as we want to see you, but as you want us to see you. And I thank you, Father, for describing to us the Messiah. One who lived and was rejected and suffered, was killed, yet was resurrected for us. And thank you, Father, that you call us to follow Jesus. Not get out in front of him, but follow him. And to be willing to take up our cross daily and follow him. Denying ourselves and only living for him. And I pray today, Father, that you would help us, that we would be your witness here. We would not be ashamed of you in our own daily life, but we'd be willing to boldly witness and stand up for you wherever we go, knowing that in the end, you will do the same for us. And we thank you for that. I pray that you would bless each and every one here, watch over them, be with them, and help us, Father, to be your witness and to be your disciple. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, nobody escaped during prayer. That's good. I always wonder if I look up and all of a sudden everybody's gone. I've prayed too long. But thanks for being here tonight. Next week we start chapter 9. Woo!
Niner.
Finally, huh?
Moving along.
We've been forever.